Hi everyone, welcome to Running Reimagined. For those of you that don't know, my name is Coach Dylan, and I'm really excited today to bring to you this conversation with Cory Reese. Cory is an author, an ultra runner. In this conversation, we had discussed his journey through the race Badwater. Badwater is a 135-mile race through Death Valley. We talked about the preparation that it took even get to the point to apply to the race, and then his challenges and his struggles during the race and how he overcame those. Just incredible stories, and I think what really jumps out in this conversation is just his authenticity. I think if you read his book, you really get the humor and just who he is as a person. And I think this conversation, you can feel that as well. I think some of the big points to listen to for runners who might not run ultra marathons, even if you're just running your first 5K, is to listen to the excitement. You can feel the energy when he talks about how excited he was just the first time he ran 6 miles, how amazed he was, and then it was 13 miles, and how amazed he was at running 13 miles. So I hope you guys enjoy this conversation, and without further ado, here's Cory. Just before we go too deep into it, for the viewer who doesn't know what Badwater is or what it's about or hasn't heard of it, could you just kind of give a brief overview for that viewer to understand what the race is?
Sure. Badwater it's a race across Death Valley. So it was originally conceived as this crazy run that goes from the lowest point in the United States to the highest point in the continental United States. And that covers, originally it was 146 miles that went to the very top of Mount Whitney. Now there's permit issues that don't let you go all the way to the top. So you go up to Whitney Portal. It's 135 miles from start to finish. The race is also in July. So just the hottest temperature ever recorded was in that area. And it's a tough race. National Geographic Adventure listed it as the toughest foot race in the world. So
Yeah.
it's pretty extreme.
Right. And there's 3 mountain ranges that you have to cross as well. So
Yeah.
it's just a minor detail.
Yeah, I kind of overlooked that little detail when I had originally signed up for it, and
Yeah.
those mountain ranges are no joke. They got me.
Right. Yeah. No, I think the most amazing thing is when you look at the elevation chart of that race, and like it's pretty flat, and then all of a sudden it just shoots
Uh-huh.
just
Yeah.
climbs. So you
Yeah.
hadn't looked at the elevation chart?
I mean, I had glanced at it, but it's one thing to like see it on paper, and to be honest, before most races, I don't really obsess too much about the elevation chart, because I figure I'm just going to run the best I can at each mile. I'm going to try to be conservative the whole time. And if I'm going up a hill, I'm going to try to be smart about it. If I'm going down, I'm going to try to be smart. So I never really get too wrapped up in the elevation profiles. This one I probably should have paid a little more attention to,
Yeah.
but it worked out. So
Right. Well, at some point you have to bite the bullet too and just
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 go.
go for it, which
Yep.
kind of leads into the next section that I really wanted to dive into was the preparation to even get to that point, because there's a ton of work that has to be put into. Well, there's an application process too, even to get in. So
Yeah.
could you just talk about the application process a little bit?
Sure. In order to even apply, you have to have run 300-mile races. Um, I had run uh, at least a couple dozen before I applied, and for years, I was just perfectly content running 100-mile races. I love that distance. I love the challenge. I had absolutely no interest in Badwater. It just sounded insane and um, miserable. I just had no interest. But after doing 100-milers for a couple of years, I started to feel a little more confident in what I was doing, and I felt like um, even if I wasn't fast, I could figure out a way to get to the finish line. And
Yeah.
so it was then that I decided, okay, I think I'm going to apply and just see what happens. So there had been a lot of preparation up to that point. I had been running for maybe 6 years, and just done I am just the average runner. I started off doing half marathons and then marathons, and started doing ultras after that, and just was content doing 100 milers for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that was one thing I kind of wanted to talk about was I think you had talked about it in your first book, Nowhere Near First, how I think you had signed up for the marathon, the first, your first marathon, and then
Yeah.
it didn't work out, and then but you felt this itch, like you just had to sign up for it. But I think the thing that can really connect with people is your honesty and your vulnerability throughout these books. I
Thank
know
you.
that's what connected with me. And so could you talk about that itch a little bit? And then also how, you're able to once, because I think there's mental hurdles once you get to each distance. And, at one point, the half marathon wasn't a problem. At one point, the marathon wasn't a problem. And now, when you started talking here, you were talking about how you got pretty comfortable running 100 miles, which sounds insane to most people. So, like, can you talk about that a little bit about, getting over those mental hurdles, starting, early on when it was in the half marathon distance?
Yeah, sure. So I live pretty close to St. George, Utah, and they have the St. George Marathon, which is a well-known race. And each year, the day after the marathon, they have a big newspaper feature with tons of pictures and awesome stories. And I remember seeing those pictures and stories and thinking, that looks so awesome. I really want to try that. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to run the St. George Marathon next year. So I'd start training, and I just, I don't know if I was too overly ambitious or was not smart in my training, but I'd get up to like 5 miles and my knees just hurt really bad. And I just thought, okay, I'm not built to run. And so I pretty much just gave it up. And then the next year, I'd see the newspaper article the day after the race and thought, gosh, I just, I really want to do that. So
Yeah.
then the same exact thing happened. I worked up, I had a training plan, 2 milers, 3 milers, 4 or 5. And I think after a 6 miler, my knees were just so jacked up and hurt so bad that I thought, okay, I'm not built to be a runner. This isn't for
Right.
me. And so finally the third year, I was able to be a little smarter with my training and finished the marathon. And like you said, it's a huge mental hurdle to just be able to go a little farther than you think you could go. And
Hmm.
I think that's what all of this is built on, is just going a little farther than you think you can. And you eventually realize, oh, okay, I can do it. It's
Right.
hard. It takes work, but I can do it. And so after doing lots of marathons, I fell in love with trail running. And I when I had a day off work, when my wife was at work and my kids were at school, my favorite thing to do is to just go out on a trail all day. And
Yeah.
I realized, well, that's kind of what an ultra marathon is just being out on the trail all day. So I
Right.
signed up for a 50 miler and did a couple of those and then jumped to 100. But um, that for me, that mental jump of 50 to 100 was the biggest jump, because in my experience, 100 miler isn't twice as hard as a 50 miler. It's like 3 or 4 times harder. It's like a 50 miler isn't twice as hard as a marathon. It's like 3 or 4 times harder. So,
Right.
but once you get to the finish line, you just feel like, gosh, I can accomplish anything I put my mind to. I distinctly remember feeling that after I ran a 6 mile run. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I just ran 6 miles. And then I remember feeling that after a half marathon. Like, my mind is blown. I just ran 13 miles. I was so proud of myself. And then the same thing for a marathon, a 100 miler. You just, once you get to that point, it's just such an incredible feeling.
Right, right. Well, and I think the one thing you had hit on was that mental mindset that pops in probably most non-runners' heads is I'm not a runner. I'm not built to be a runner because my knees hurt because the pain that they're going through. But how are you able to get past that knee pain? Because I think you had mentioned it. I don't know if it was in a talk that I listened to with you or a book, but you had talked about how if you're starting to feel your knees hurt, or if you're starting to feel you're sick, you just don't go out and do the run that you were supposed to, and it's just
Yeah.
about listening to your body. So could you, because I think that's, if people can get past that, then they can get to that 6 mile run and they're like,
Yeah.
oh man, this is great. So could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. For
Or what?
me, there's two huge parts of that. There's listening to your body over listening to a training plan. So that's really what got me in trouble the first couple of years trying to train for a marathon. Was I would look at my training plan that I just printed online, and it would say, okay, go run 4 miles today. But I was sore and my knees were like not feeling it, but I didn't listen to my body. I saw I saw what was on the training plan, so I did what it told me to do. Well, that's dumb. I remember, um, gosh, that's like the way to get injured, is to listen to the training
Right.
plan instead of listening to your body. So that was a huge thing for me, was to listen to what my body was telling me. If I needed to rest, I learned to rest and not stress about it. And if I was feeling good and wanted to go a little farther, then I would. So that's one big thing that I learned. The second thing is, this should be fun.
Mhm.
So if you're trying to get into running and it's not fun, you're doing something wrong. So for me, what I was doing wrong was trying to go too fast too soon, or trying to do too many miles too soon. So I realized, okay, if I slow down a little bit, if I take some walk breaks, if I back off the mileage a little, if I stop and take a few pictures, whatever, like,
Right.
do whatever you have to do to make it fun. It should be fun.
Right.
If it's not, you're doing it wrong. And then the miles build. They come.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I think that to that point, I've had more fun running this year than I think I have in a long time. And I think it's because when I was training in college, it's so intense and it's
Yeah.
about the time and and then all of a sudden it's taken me 4 years now to figure out that, hey, I can actually slow down and enjoy
Right.
things.
Yeah.
And that in turn is probably going to allow me to run faster because I'm actually enjoying it.
It's
So
so true.
yeah,
So
yeah,
true.
no, and there's a lot of people I'll talk to who they'll talk about how they want to build this big training plan, and I'm like, where you are right now, just go out and run a mile and enjoy it. Like,
Yeah.
don't, if you have to walk, but don't worry about too much more, and just be consistent with that, and you'll build up from there. But I think that people can get way too caught up in their training plans and the times and forget about that piece of just having fun.
Yeah. It's so true. Right now, I mean, for years, I I haven't done a training plan. I just figure,
Yeah.
if I'm feeling good and I have the time, I want to go run. So if I have an hour today, I'll just go run however far I run in an hour, and that's good. If I have 5 hours to go after the kids go to bed, I'll go run for 5 hours. If I'm tired, or if work is too busy and I don't have time to run, that's okay. Like, I don't stress about it anymore. It's
Right.
it's a good feeling.
Right. Well, and that kind of brings up an interesting point. So when you prepare for like 100-mile race, what does that preparation look like? Is it just, maybe trying to run so many days a week, but, sticking to that, exactly what you're saying, where if, I feel like running more, I'll run more? Or how do you know that you're going through the right stuff to prepare you, so when you get to the race, you know that you can handle it?
Yeah, it's different now because I've done it, and so I know what I'm in for, and I know
Sure.
how bad it's going to hurt. I know what I'm going to have to do to push myself to the finish. But
Yeah.
the first couple hundred milers, it's so scary because you don't know what you're in for. And so I did follow training plans really closely then, because you want to feel like uh, I've done the work. I hope, like,
Right.
if these people who made this plan say I am prepared, I have no idea whether I am or not.
Right.
I I think the confidence that came from following a training plan was important early on. But
Yeah.
now I try to get in some good long runs. I I usually don't focus too much on mileage, but more time on my feet. So
Okay.
um, I mean, ideally, I'd like to. Um, gosh, I just it just
Yeah.
varies so much.
Right.
I'm happy with 50 or 60 miles a week.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's some, I mean, sometimes I'm higher than that. Sometimes I'm 80
Yeah.
miles a week, but not usually. I tend to be a lower mileage runner, but if I can get in a couple good 25 or 30-mile runs before a 100-miler, I'm
You're
feeling
feeling.
pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about that I think is just so amazing is that I don't know what year it was. You'll have to let me know, but you had run 100-mile race for was it 100-mile race every month
Yeah.
for a whole year?
Yeah. Yeah.
What triggered that
Oh
motivation?
gosh. Poor life choices. No, I looked at the calendar and just had kind of an idea of like, okay, that race is in October, this one is in April, and I had maybe 6 or 7 races that I thought I'd like to do those this year.
Yeah.
And then I realized, well, gosh, I could plug in some other races or runs in those other months and probably do one a month. So that was a unique experience because I didn't really have to train at all that whole year because you're either recovering or tapering for the next run. So I'd run 100-miler and then not do a ton of running in between that and the next 100-miler, and um, it was a challenging adventure. I think the closest I did, my schedule was really crazy one month, and so the only weekend that I could do it one month was it happened to be 1 week after my
Oh,
previous
geez.
100-miler, so they were a week apart. That one hurt. That was hard, but
Yeah.
um, I mean, it hurt at first, just because I was sore and
Yeah.
tired, had just that lingering tired fatigue feeling. But once I got going again, um, it was okay. The
Yeah.
the guy who really inspired me is his name is Ed Eddinghausen. He's he dresses up as the jester at all these races, and he ran, I think, 4,400 milers in one year.
Jeez.
Um, that that's I think it was the same year that I did that. Maybe he did it the year before. And so I just thought about Ed so often. He's
Yeah.
a good friend of mine, and whenever I started to think like, can I really do this? I always thought about Ed and like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how you can draw so much inspiration from just the running community, and especially I feel like the ultra community um, is just different. It's so much different than the marathon and down, and especially things. The trail community is just so different. Um, one of the races that really jumped out to me during that your year of doing these 100 miles was I think you had a self-created one, and I think you were running to, was it Salt Lake and back?
Yeah.
And but I think it really showcased the running community because could you talk just a little bit about the support that you received and how all that came together?
Yeah, I think that might have been my first solo 100-miler. So I started
Okay.
down in downtown Salt Lake and then ran 50 miles south and then back up. And I didn't have crew or aid or anything. I just stopped at 7-Elevens along the way and refilled my pack and
Dr. Pepper.
bought gummy bears and Dr. Pepper. So it worked out. But I was so I was so amazed along the way. I I just I just put a post on Facebook saying, "Hey, this is the route I'm running," and asked for some feedback on it. And um, I just I really was totally expecting to do the whole run myself, and I was prepared for that. I was fine with it. I had done enough 100 milers before that I knew I would be okay. And I was I was so surprised that along the way, so many friends showed up to run a couple miles or a couple hours, or um, my friend Jenna Lynn like brought a sandwich and some strawberries and just dropped them off, and so many people along the way just showed up. My friend Kendall was was there with a cooler of ice when it was the hottest part of the day. I wasn't expecting him. He never said he was coming, but when I was so hot, he happened to be there with ice. And then there were so many people that I didn't know, but that had just seen this post on Facebook of this guy running
And
around Utah. And
someone brought you a tracker, right? And so
yeah,
then
yeah, yes,
yeah.
yeah. They that was like within the first maybe 10 miles. My friend said, "Do you have a do you, are you carrying a tracker?" And I said, "No, I don't have one." And so she left and showed up like a half hour later and clipped one to my pack. And so that was really cool too. Like I went into a Subway to grab a sandwich that during the night, and some people were like, "Yeah, we could see you coming," and
Oh,
yeah.
so
So
wow.
it was really uh, it just reinforced what an awesome running community.
Hmm.
It's just tight when you're a runner. It's an awesome group of people. And um, I have found that ultra runners. I mean, when you're out on the trail with someone for hours on end, you
Hmm.
really get to know that person, and you see the good, bad, and ugly, and it just makes those relationships really strong.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that I think like we were talking before, I was a part of the Seattle Running Company youth program, and Scott McCubry was the race director of this White River 50 mile that I'm doing. But for him, we did a lot of volunteer work for the ultra community because he just put on a lot of races. And so um, we got to know it through that. And it's just two different communities where, you have the road running, very intense, type approach. And then the ultra is very laid back. And I think I heard the other day Rich Roll make a comment talking about how when people sign up for an ultra marathon, they're there to be a part of the journey, and it's about self discovery, and it's about something deeper than just trying to complete a
Yeah,
race.
yeah, I see that.
Yeah. So cool. Well, let's just kind of go a little bit into your preparation once you knew you got into Badwater, the things you did to help prepare yourself for the heat, in the desert.
Yeah, I have an advantage of living in southern Utah where it's regularly 100 to 110 degrees. I mean, that's every day of the summer. It's at least 100. So one thing that I did with my training was to try, when possible, to run during the heat of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the St. George Running Center and talked to my friend Steve and said, "Sell me the hottest pair of tights you have, and the hottest um the hottest clothes you have. I want to buy them." And so I went on my training runs with tights, usually a couple layers of tights, and then a long sleeve shirt, and then like a base layer, and then a sweatshirt. And sometimes I would put a wool hat on. um, if I put the wool hat on. I usually tried to go run on trails instead of around the neighborhood because I I know how ridiculous I looked running around in 110-degree heat with all these layers on. But it helped. It was a huge help to just get me used to running in the heat.
Yeah.
The other thing I did is I bought a gym membership and spent a lot of time in the sauna at the gym. And gosh, I hate the sauna so much now.
Yeah.
It's just like a personal pain cave. I just hate it.
You haven't been back.
I have not been back for one single minute. But that also I think helped a ton to
Yeah.
get me prepared for the heat. I mean, it the heat of Death Valley in the summer really is indescribable. Um, I mean, it's 115, 110, 115 here, and so I know heat, but
Right.
when you get to Death Valley and you open the door of the car, it it really is indescribable how hot it is there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah, and when you were talking about that, I was thinking back to I in college I lived and trained in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay.
So I think I get the level of heat you're talking about in Utah, and I never could imagine going out and running
Uh-huh.
in
Uh-huh.
tights and a beanie.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I think yeah, I've never been to Death Valley, but from what I hear, it's just another level
it is.
of heat.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's really interesting. I I felt like there were a couple things that helped me deal with the heat. One, the training that I had done,
Mhm.
but then I also learned some little tricks to help deal with the heat, like to put some ice in your hat, to put ice in a bandana, and then the ice just kind of like drips down and keeps your shirt wet. And so, even though the heat was a huge challenge during the race, I felt like it was manageable because of the preparation I had done. So,
Yeah, that seemed like in the book, just talking about your crew that you had and how they were on a rhythm where it was every 2 miles they did this, 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 and like was that something that you had figured out through interviewing, people who've done Badwater, or was that a training, something you did in your training, or how'd you get to that, routine of that?
good question. So, everyone I had on my crew, we were all rookies. We had never been to Badwater before. And I told someone at the race, like the day before, she asked who was with me on my crew and who had experience, and I told them that we were all rookies. And she's like, oh boy, oh boy. So that's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
But the requirements are that you can only stop every 2 miles to give your runner aid. So there's no aid stations along the way. Your crew is really your lifeline. And so they would stop every 2 miles and have bottles of water and food and stuff. Um, Toward the end, they had to like beg me to try to eat something. You know how it is. Like
Yeah,
later in a race, you don't want to eat anything, and so I did like tailwind and liquid calories and stuff. But you I was so impressed with the friends that I had on my crew and my wife. You really wouldn't have known that they were all rookies. They just kind of got into a flow, and I think they just figured out pretty quick, like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what's going to help him the most. Another very important thing, this is how we can take care of ourselves, because it's easy when you're crewing to just get so focused on helping the runner that you don't take care of yourself, and that's not good. So
right.
they did a good job of figuring out how to take care of themselves and also help me, and
Yeah.
it ended up being awesome.
Yeah. And your crew had been around you before in terms of like other races. So it helped probably at least knowing signs of what you were going through.
Yeah, they knew how I handle adversities,
Yeah.
and I'm not usually the one to just complain and be miserable. But if I am miserable, I'm just kind of quiet, and I'm just kind of stay in my own little personal pain cave. And so
Yeah.
they knew when I was quiet that I was going through a tough time, and I just needed to keep going and work through it.
Right, right, right. Can you talk about some specific times within Badwater that you hit that point where it was kind of that limit? And because I had a quote from you that, and I don't want to screw it up, so I'll kind of read it. But it was, I think it was talking about what you get out of doing, this race or these races, and it was, I think, it is the satisfaction of pushing myself to the very limit and then seeing if I can push myself a little farther. Do
Hmm.
you have some specific examples of when you felt that in Badwater and then were able to push farther? And was that, your crew helping motivate you, or was that an internal thing? Or
Um, Gosh, I had quite a few of those
yeah.
experiences, where you think, okay, this couldn't get any harder than it is now, and then it does. And
Okay.
um, I remember, um, gosh, the first one was probably, um, the the first mountain range. It's called Town Pass, and this this climb just feels like it goes on forever. And if you look at the elevation chart for it, it looks like it goes on forever. It's so long and steep, and I was close to the cutoff, and I was just so scared that I wasn't going to be able to make the cutoff, and
Hmm.
that was just so discouraging. Thinking, I've trained so hard for this. I've brought these people here to Death Valley. I've invested so much time and effort into this, and now I'm not even going to make the first time cutoff. And I don't know. I seem to be able to find this next gear when I'm really up against something tight, and so I just tried to run and push to get to the time cutoff in time, and managed to make it there just barely, and that was a huge relief. But anyone who runs at the back of the pack can tell you what a stress it is to just be up against that cutoff,
Hmm.
and it's demoralizing and hard to keep going. But so
Right.
that was probably the first really hard time. The the next really tough time was the second mountain climb. It was, and then leading into the second night of the race. So I mean, you just keep going for 135 miles. It's not like you pull
Right.
off and spend the night at a motel. So the second night, I have never felt anything like it. The sleep deprivation was,
Yeah.
just it was painful. Actually, it I've never felt anything like it. It was painful to be so tired, and I just had a hard time even putting one foot in front of the other. And so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna lay down in the van and try to sleep for 10 minutes, and I couldn't. So I just started going again, and
Yeah.
the sleepwalking thing is really just miserable. So that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, was that second night of the race. And then just the final climb up Mount
Mhm.
Whitney Portal is, um
And that's the last 13 miles of the race,
yep,
correct? Just for
last
everybody.
13
Yeah.
miles.
Yeah.
And this road, you got to see pictures of it. It's vertical. It was so hot outside. I was it was really tough.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and I just kept thinking, I just genuinely don't think I can do this. I've come
Yeah.
so far. I've got 13 miles left, but I have 0% left in my body. But
Yeah.
I don't know. You just keep putting one foot in front of the other. It sounds so cheesy and cliche, but that's all you can do.
Right. Right. Well, and I think when you were describing the last 13 miles in the book, I was thinking of like the Tour de France when you see those guys go up those just crazy climbs and
Yes.
how like they're barely moving,
Yes.
up those climbs,
Yes.
and it's just
That's exactly what it's like.
okay, yeah. But 100 and, however hot degrees.
Right, right.
So wow. Yeah, no, I think that's truly amazing. And the sleep deprivation is, one thing I had to just kind of ask about a little bit, because I mean, how do you even prepare? Is that some prep, like some runs you do before where you try to stay up and push through like an overnight experience, or because I personally, I know for myself, I don't handle sleep deprivation well,
hmm
and I know there's probably a lot of other people who don't. So how did you help, what helped you with that?
I do some late night runs, and um, the 100 milers are good training because you're going all night during
Yeah.
those. And for me personally, that sleep deprivation, even in 100 miler, is the hardest part of the race. I just struggle with that so much. I don't know. I think some people have a harder time than others. I've talked to lots of people who say they drink a Red Bull and they're tired, but they just keep going. And then you talk to some people where it's like they're being smothered. Like they just it's agony.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's how it is for me. And so I I'm used to that in 100 milers, but at Badwater I was awake for 2 nights. And so that second night, I mean, I was tired the first night, but
Right.
then you run all through the heat again, and
Mhm.
then another night, and it just was. I couldn't find anything to work. I told my wife, um, I'm just gonna stand here, and I want you to slap me across the face. I tried energy drinks. I tried power naps. I tried caffeine pills.
Yeah.
I, I I could not find anything to snap me out of it.
Yeah.
And the hard thing is that on that next day, most of the time, if you can just get through the night, once the sun comes up, you start feeling better.
Hmm.
That after after that second night, I did not feel better once the sun came up. I still just struggled so much with the sleepwalking and the sleep deprivation. So that's another part of what made that last 13 miles really hard. I was just so tired.
Yeah, yeah. When you finally got up that last 13, and it sounds like you had to make, well, there's basically, I think you simplified the course into like 3 or 4 turns.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
essentially the whole course. So
right.
when you finally had to turn it and you knew you could see the finish, you knew it was right there. You know, were you were you able to really appreciate and feel that full experience? Or were you just so out of it that you looked back and there was a little bit of a blank space? Because
Yeah,
I know I've heard how that kind of can go that way.
yeah. Um, so before that 13 miles, you look up at Mount Whitney and you see this little zigzag go up the mountain, and it you just think like that was the first time I had ever seen that. I had never been there, and I saw that little zigzag go up the mountain to the highest point in the continental United States, and I just thought, you've got to be joking me. That cannot be the road that we're going on, but it was, and so it was. That sight was pretty depressing.
Yeah.
I was sad and I was scared of trying to do that, but the last couple of miles, it's really cool. You can look down at the valley and you can see across the valley and the mountain range that you covered before, and it was just a really weird experience to be like, wow, I many hours ago I was over there. That is so crazy that my feet have carried me this far. And then the last couple of miles is just kind of like winding switchbacks, and I I kept thinking the finish line has got to be around this next corner, and then it wasn't, and then I think,
Yeah.
okay, it's got to be around this next corner, and that happened for a few miles, and finally, just to see the finish line, um, it's an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I got there to the finish line, and they had the ribbon going across, and I just closed my eyes and held it for a second, and I just wanted to really breathe in that whole experience. It was life changing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Well, it's probably just really hard to even put into words. I mean,
Yeah.
after going through such a journey and such a challenge
Yep.
like that. So,
Yeah.
uh, what like kind of leading into that, what would you ever do it again?
That's a tough question. I've gone back to crew a few times, which is
Okay.
kind of fun to be part of the Badwater experience without running all 135 miles.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I definitely think about it each year that the application period opens.
Hmm.
I think should I? Um, but I haven't had that little click to say, okay, yeah, let's let's apply.
Right.
Um, so it
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet. I've learned to never say never
Yeah.
because I for a long time I said I would never do Badwater. You would have to be a complete idiot to do Badwater, and then I did it. So that may make me a complete idiot, but I've learned to never say never.
Right, right. Well, and you did so much work and you know, accomplished this amazingly intense race. What do you have something else that's out, you know, like out there in the distance that you're looking at that you want to go after, whether it's a race or you know, a challenge or something like that? Do you have something that's in your head for
Yeah, the next big thing I'm gonna try to do is it's called the Ball State 500K. So it's put on by Laz, who does the Barkley Marathon,
Mhm.
and it's 315 miles across Tennessee,
Okay.
and um, that is actually coming up in July. It
Okay.
happens to be the same time as Badwater, so I'm on one hand I'm sad because I won't be able to go to Badwater this year to crew,
Yeah.
but I'm also really excited to try this race. That's going to be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just how many people are in that race?
I think there's a couple hundred.
Okay.
There's two categories. There's crude and screwed. So the crude has people to help them, and then there's screwed, where basically you have a map that tells you where to go, and that's all you have. So it's kind of like that run that I did before, where you just stop at gas stations along the way and
Yeah. Yeah.
go for 315 miles.
Right. So are you having a crew for that
Nope, I'm in the screwed
Oh,
category.
oh well, that'll be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And one thing that you had talked about kind of towards the end of the book, you talked about how important you went a little bit Tony Robbins, which I loved, but you had talked about your why and how important it is to know why you're doing it, and just uh, that's what helps this, you know, motivation. What is your why, you know, behind, you know, all of this?
Yeah, I think with running, I've gained so much insight and um, belief in myself just by pushing myself and trying to go beyond what I think I'm capable of. And so for me, the why is just trying to push that line out a little more and just seeing what I'm made of, seeing how much I'm capable of, and really, I think that's what got me into running in the first place. It was that sense of accomplishment after running 6 miles and just having my mind blown, like, wow, I really am capable of doing this. I wasn't sure I was able to, but I've proven to myself that I can. And then that sense that you feel after a half marathon and a marathon and a 100 miler. Um, it it's pretty cool to just feel like I can do what I put my mind to, and that's great in running. I mean, cool, but really big deal. Like who cares? This is just a hobby that we're having fun with, and so I try to incorporate that in my life too. I try to incorporate it into my relationships and my family and my job, and try to push a little farther and do a little more, and do the very best that I can in what I do. I think ideally the lessons that we learn through running, hopefully we can transfer those to other areas of our life. So
Yeah.
that's what's been the biggest thing for me, is just seeing how much I'm capable of, and then also seeing that all of us, I think, are probably capable of a lot more than we know we are,
Hmm.
and then figuring out how to incorporate that into just everyday life.
Right. Right. No, I couldn't agree more. It's a great answer. And I think it's also amazing how, by living that lifestyle and pushing yourself, and running and in other areas, how it inspires people that you didn't think, it would even impact. And all of a
Yeah,
sudden, you're impacting people that you didn't even, yeah, you didn't, it wasn't your intention, but
yeah,
just by living that way. So
yeah.
that's awesome. Well, thanks, Corey. I really appreciate your time and all your stories. If you want to purchase Corey's book, I'll put it in the comments. The link will be right in the comments there for both books. They are extremely, he opens himself up. He's vulnerable. He's talks about the challenges, talks about how it relates to life. He gives the history of Badwater. And Corey, he does it. You do it in such a humorous way, where like all of your metaphors and similes, it definitely makes you laugh. So if you like to listen to it, it's also on Audible. And Corey, if they want to reach out to you, do you have anywhere that they could reach out to you, or do you want them
Yeah,
to?
yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear from
Yeah.
people. I have a website, fastcory.com, and then,
Okay.
or you can find me, Cory Reese, on Facebook. I'd love to shoot some messages back and forth and say hello. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dylan.
Okay.
It's been good to talk to you.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you did, please hit the like button. If you know somebody who would benefit from it, please share it with them. It's our goal to help as many runners as possible, and we feel using these social media channels are the best way to do it. Until next time, guys, take care.